Nintendo had some serious hopes for this one, and quite frankly, I can't blame them. They were teaming up with Platinum Games, and after the success with Bayonetta 2, it only seemed reasonable that this was going to garner some success. So, at the request of my patron Alex Shemp, it's time to review Star Fox Zero for the Nintendo Wii U. Now, when I first saw this announced, I was actually very excited about it, especially considering the decade-long Star Fox drought. And man, promotion was everywhere for this game. Nintendo even went as far as to make a 15-minute long Star Fox cartoon, which by the way I recommend giving a watch, it's surprisingly good. And as more details were given to us about the game, the more excited I got for its release. So how does it hold up? Well, let's take a look. The game stars Fox McCloud and his ragtag team of pilots, Peppy, Slippy, and Falco, and they are called upon by General Pepper to put a stop to Andross, a mad scientist who is hell-bent on taking over the Lilat system. And so, beckoned by the call of duty, they take to the skies to put a stop to Andross and bring back peace to the Lilat system. This probably sounds very familiar to a lot of you, and that's because it is. This is basically a retelling of the original Star Fox, and by extension Star Fox 64, which I found very weird because didn't they already do a remake for the 3DS? I suppose Nintendo wanted to give fans what they absolutely loved about the original Star Fox games with a few tweaks here and there, and I can get behind that. But with Star Fox Zero, the game's been remade 3 times now. I feel like they're spinning their wheels at this point. But to say that Star Fox Zero is exactly the same as Star Fox 64 would be doing it a disservice. But at the same time, I feel like that's not entirely inaccurate. Well, let's get some positives going first, and I'm going to address the obvious one right now. This game is gorgeous. This is more than a graphics update. Platinum Games went out of their way to make sure that this game looked pretty. The environments are very well detailed, and anytime you're playing the game, there's always something going on. The game looks good enough as is, and the aesthetic is further augmented when it's in motion. The Lilat system has never looked this good. Also, major props to the sound department. Not only does this game look pretty, it sounds pretty. Everything is on point here, from very satisfying and intuitive sound effects to a breathtaking soundtrack. Seriously, give it a listen, a personal favorite of mine being Starwolf's theme. In terms of gameplay, Star Fox Zero does bring in some new mechanics to set it apart. In particular, the R-Wing Walker finally makes an appearance, and the brand new Gyro Wing, which isn't used very often, which I consider a shame. I actually kinda like this thing. And of course, like its predecessors, you can choose your missions as you go through the Lilat system, with some secret missions hidden here and there, and you can take different paths with multiple playthroughs. It also helps that the game is only about 2 to 3 hours long to augment this, so the replay value is there. So yeah, as a Star Fox game, Star Fox Zero certainly checks all the boxes, but it was kind of doomed from the start for 2 very specific reasons. To start, the way you control this game is clunky to say the least. You have a view of the R-Wing and the general surroundings on the TV, but you use the Wii U gamepad to get a cockpit view of what you're shooting at, which I think is a cool idea on paper, but in practice, it's messy. It forces the player to constantly switch their focus between the R-Wing and the cockpit, and in the rail segments this isn't so bad, but in the dogfights, oh boy did this get irritating. It is something you can get used to eventually, making the second playthrough a lot more comfortable, but the first time around, goodness gracious, be prepared for some frustration. And personally, I got dizzy after a while. And unfortunately, I think that's detrimental to this game's status as a remake because it makes me miss the simplistic controls of Star Fox 64, and that's not a good sign. It doesn't make the game necessarily difficult. In fact, I can safely say that the challenge of this game is pretty fair, but I'm not a fan of multitasking in what I consider a very high-octane game. I'd rather just focus on one thing in order to get the job done. And then there's a second reason that this game was doomed from the start, and that's because it was released at the tail end of the already failing Wii U's life cycle. Star Fox Zero was released mere months before the Nintendo Switch hit the store shelves, and by that point the Wii U was already taking its final steps into its deathbed. Maybe Nintendo thought that Star Fox Zero would be the Wii U's final-ditch effort to get back on its feet, but it was never meant to be. So while this game isn't necessarily bad or anything, the unfortunate circumstances regarding its development pretty much eliminates any worth in its investment. Seriously though, if you want to experience what Star Fox Zero has to offer, just play Star Fox 64. It's cheaper and you're more likely to get your money's worth. It's a damn shame too. This game had a lot of potential. It just didn't cut it.